Hello, aliens and worms, I'm Cosmicat, and I appreciate you tuning into this broadcast. From deep space today, I have a speed art vlog for your consumption. The subject today is, of course, none other than Nymin, my most dear and precious character. I did this drawing back towards the end of July this year. Typically, after a few months, weeks, or even in the span of a few days, I have already grown to dislike my drawings, even if I loved them at the time. However, this is one that I still adore even over the half a year it's been since I created it. I actually almost used it as the face of this channel before I came up with the idea you see me using now. Because of this drawing in particular is important to me. It's something of a symbol that, even as I grow, I can still look fondly on my progress without feeling ashamed. Since both this artwork and character are deeply important to me, perhaps I should spend this video talking about Nymin and how Z relates to me. I want to do a video in the future talking more specifically about Nymin as a character and their role in the story I want to write, but I want to have the appropriate artwork to pair with it before I do. For now, we can consider this a backstory on the characters themselves rather than a description of how Z will be in their timeline. One of the biggest reasons Nymin is important to me is that, in their original form, Z was literally made to be a representation of myself. I was diagnosed with depression towards the end of my 11th grade year. This, in itself, was jarring, and of course meant a lot of my life had to change. It seemed like everything all of a sudden had to revolve around my mental illness. My parents, the incredibly loving and fantastic people that they are, devoted a lot of time and money into things that would help me to deal with this as my life continued forward. Maybe they went so far because we all thought I only had 1 year to go before I went to college and then to face the real world. But I will always appreciate the effort they put in, but at the time, it was difficult to understand. I started therapy with a fantastic person named John. I can still remember his smile to this day. He was gentle and kind, and he gave me many of the tools I use to this day to help me prevent depressive episodes and deal with them if they happen. He encouraged me to use my creativity to express myself, and we would spend a lot of time in the art room at the office he worked at. I mean, sure, it was made for kids, but he seemed to realize how much easier it was for me to open up when my eyes and hands were focused on other things. Eventually, I started doing the same thing at home. I didn't have a therapist at home to talk to while drawing or painting, but the internet was always there as a sounding board. Maybe it's because I never really liked drawing myself, or maybe it's because I didn't feel like myself, but I created a character named Zero to act as the representative of me and my feelings about myself. As you can see from this drawing of Zero I just put on your screen right now, I've improved pretty significantly since then, but it's still obvious that Nymin was derived from Zero. Zero existed in a daily diary comic that I had planned on doing to document my journey through life as a person with mental illness. The design was very intentional. I made Zero an alien because that's how I felt. I felt alien to the world around me, especially at this key point in my life where I was being given so much new attention due to the realization that I was depressed, and it seemed like everyone was experimenting on me to see what would fix me faster and better. On top of that, no one I had ever known had spoken about depression in any kind of meaningful way. I felt alone and outcasted, while simultaneously feeling singled out and hypervisible. Everything was overwhelming. There was another key feature of Zero that I didn't really think about at the time. I always considered him to be male. I vaguely remember portraying myself as male in online spaces to avoid being harassed as female. There was probably some truth to that, but I think it was a way for me to explore my feelings about my own personal gender without having known anything about being transgender or non-binary. I only made this comic for about a month before I stopped. I don't quite remember why, but I think it was because it became too strenuous to try to keep a schedule like that. Honestly, to this day, I have problems keeping focused and motivated on long-term projects. This was all back in 2009 though, and Zero didn't really get drawn much after that. And if I did draw him, I don't believe I posted it online anywhere. Digging through files and art accounts, the next time I can find him is in 2014. From what I can gather, 2009 was around the time I started devoting a lot of my free time to online role-playing and a website called Gaia Online. An interesting and true fact is that the outfit Nymin is wearing in this drawing was originally designed on Gaia Online using their avatar dress-up feature. But back on topic. Zero resurfaced in 2014 simply as a callback to those comics I used to do. If I recall correctly, I was digging through old files looking for inspiration when I found him and decided to redesign him for fun. Of course, I ended up falling in love with my new and improved alien friend, so it was around this time where Zero became Nymin. The name Zero still exists today, but as a call name for the group of stories and artworks I've made involving Nymin and the universe he exists in. Project Planet Zero. I dropped the A in the name for whatever reason, I probably forgot it. But regardless, in July of 2014, a full 5 years and 2 months after Xyr's initial creation, I decided I wanted to write a story about Nymin and Xyr life. I made a video about it on my old channel, in fact. However, I still wasn't great at sticking to a single idea of mine, and Nymin ended up only being drawn or written about in spurts here or there for the next 2 years. However, Z and Xyr friends were consistently a key feature in my daydreams. Despite not making them a main focus of my art and writing, these characters went through a lot of development entirely in my head. At one point, they existed to function as an allegory to my sense of self. Tekwo, a large, grumpy, intimidating fellow, was created to harbor my anger, heartbreak, and feelings of betrayal. Ilanan, a fellow member of Nymin's species, held all my fears, misery, and the parts of me that I felt were created out of my mental illness. Nymin, however, made quite the interesting journey. As Zero, he represented a me that felt alien and alone, but as Nymin became the me that I thought I would have or could have been had it not been for me suffering from depression and perpetual heartbreak. Nymin was wildly independent, well-liked and upbeat, as he was silly and terribly naive. He loved life, loved companionship, and even made positives out of Xyr vices. Nymin became a symbol for me, like a guiding light to tell me where I should go next. Z became the ideal version of myself. Since this point, all these characters have taken on their own identities, mostly separate from mine, but Nymin is the one who is most closely associated with my idea of self. Z has their own stories, their own struggles, and their own independent thoughts and actions, but Z is still a huge part of me. Z helps me feel like it's okay to act silly and get overexcited about things, and Z gives me a feeling of self-love. If Nymin is based on who I think my true self is, and I love Nymin, then I must love myself. On top of this, both as Zero and as Nymin, Z helped me to explore my ideas of gender. As Nymin went through changes, Z went from being male to having no gender at all. There was even a live stream where I spoke about how Nymin being genderless was created from my idea of a utopia being a society that puts no expectations or projections onto a person based on the circumstances of their birth. As such, Nymin and Xyr whole species are all born with male and female characteristics. Nymin himself was androgynous in both appearance and in clothing style, giving him a further connection to the feeling of freedom and independence. Since Nymin is so closely related to me, it's no surprise that I, with the help of my friends, trace this idea back to myself eventually. I don't tend to talk with others about being non-binary very often because of the mixed reactions the topic brings about, but through this character I can always feel secure in my idea of myself despite the negativity of others. In the end, I am my own to create and evolve, just like Zero and Nymin are. I've been considering lately that Nymin is so whimsical and almost childlike in some ways because my sense of self was lost in childhood due to depression. Nymin, perhaps, is where I left off in my development before the bullying started. Maybe it's foolish to think that I would have remained so cheerful and lively even if the burdens of mental illness had never been a factor, but I don't dwell on this too much. This prospect of my true self is overall a positive goal for me to aim for, and the intricacies do not stem from a harmful place. Thank you for taking this trip through time with me. I can't wait to tell you more about Nymin himself and Xyr's story so we can journey through space together as well. In the meantime, please feel free to ask me questions about anything I've spoken about during this transmission, or talk to me about some of your own characters and why they're important to you. Also, feel free to give me suggestions of things you'd like to hear my thoughts on in the future. Don't forget to check the fuel in your ship. This has been Cosmicat, end transmission.